down, getting ready to start. Oh, already started. It is for infinity and beyond. April 8th, it is day 334. It is the reading room. How large is God? Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. Lots on my mind right now. I'm just thinking about Sister Maria, God of the universe. She did have some answers, though. She didn't think of herself as God of the universe by any means. Those answers are hard to come by. And she had them. Such, then, are some of the considerations arising out of modern cosmology. But long before these ideas about the origins of the universe were found, astronomy had been forcing a reassessment of our ideas of God and of our own place in the cosmos. You know, so many things, don't you just want to say, leave it alone? Just leave it alone. Leave it alone. Stop touching it. Stop touching it. What are you, in third grade? Okay. Where you fell in love with science? Let me make sure. How large is God? This is the Voices of Scientists and Theologians. This is the third article, but you can see we're on chapter 4 still, and on day, what does it say there? I don't know. 8. Infinity. F. Russell Stannard. By F. Russell. And so this is the second, part number 2. Part number 2 is approaches to scientific and theological answers. This is the first chapter in part 2, which is approaching God through paradox. So each one of these are giving you the paradox about God. So far we've read about, and it is kind of interesting. I mean, it certainly is an interesting approach to this article. God of the Bible, right? So this is where I thought, you know what? We can write in this. God be, so that's kind of what I think about the book. We can write in it. It can be written in God beyond appearances, and then the paradox of God beyond appearances, right? God the Father, and the paradox of God the Father, right? And although I'm not sure if they did that a great job in presenting those sides of that one. God the Creator, and the paradox of that. And now we are at God of the universe. So you can kind of look for the paradox because they don't point it out so readily. Such then are some of the considerations arising out of modern cosmology, but long before these ideas about the origins of the universe were formulated, astronomy had been forcing a reassessment of our ideas of God and of our own place in the cosmos. Let me also mention that that you can follow me along in this book because the book is online and it's not gonna it's not going to actively, darn it, what was it supposed to be again? Yeah, that's what it was supposed to be. So it's online on Internet Archive. Archive.org, sorry. Archive.org. The whole copy is there. You could read with me. In the light of the work of Copernicus and Galileo, so here we start with our paradox. It came to be recognized that contrary to previous assumption, Earth did assumptions, Earth did not occupy center stage. It was but one planet among several orbiting the sun. This process of reevaluating the importance of our earthly home has continued apace ever since. Our present understanding of the immensity of the universe almost defies description. 1,000,000 Earths could fit within the volume of the sun. Each star is a sun. There are 100,000 million stars in the Milky Way galaxy. There are 100,000 million galaxies. They are spread out over such volumes of space that it has taken light 12 million years to travel to us from the farthest reaches of space, and that despite a speed of 186,000 miles per second. That's your math skills. Yeah. That's what's wrong with this picture. And God created all this. No, he did not. No, you know what he didn't create? He didn't create the measurement of 100,000 million galaxies. He didn't create the measurement of 12 million years, and didn't give his little nod to the scientists that that's correct. And he did not give this traveling of 186,000 miles per second. He didn't give his nod to that either. Those are your measures. That's your math. That's how you measure things. You know, kind of like time. And God created all this. We have indeed come a long way from the God who was originally thought to be confined to living on a mountain in the Sinai desert. Contemplation, you know, and you don't know that he didn't exist there. I mean, you know, there's could be the Holy Spirit sitting here in Novi. You gotta not be such a ding-a-ling-a-ling. The psalmist who saw the heavens as declaring the glory of God could have but glimpsed the true splendor that lay beyond the few thousand pinpricks of twinkling light visible to the naked eye. That was his idea of the heavens. And what of life elsewhere in the universe? Already there is firm evidence pointing to 7 cases of planets going round nearby stars. With the new observational techniques now at our disposal, we are doubtless on the threshold of discovering many, many more worlds. From what we know of the formation of stars and planets, we would expect there to be vast numbers of planetary systems similar to our own solar system. A substantial fraction of these are likely to include planets so placed in relation to their sun that they would be temperate and thus potentially conducive to the development of life. Whether life actually has developed there or not is a matter of conjecture until searches for signals from outer space succeed in demonstrating an alien culture trying to make contact with us with intelligent messages. There can be no proof one way or the other. But to assume, meanwhile, that we are the only intelligent life force in the universe would appear somewhat egocentric. Having learned a lesson in humility from Galileo, perhaps it is more realistic to accept that the universe probably teems with intelligent life forms. Yeah, but you know, we don't have to get on the team of other intelligent life forms because we got on the team with Galileo. See how they make leaps? See how they make leaps unattractive? The God of evolution. So that's it. Oh no, sorry. One more paragraph. That being so, one can imagine that God is as much interested in those aliens as he is in us. Indeed, possibly more so if they have advanced spiritually more than we have so far on this planet. All of which, of course, is a far cry from the tribal God interested only in the Jews, or even the one who was simply the God of all the people on earth. There is no doubt that the findings of astronomy have done much to draw our attention to the sheer scale on which God works. Yeah, but again, you end up as a scientist putting your ideas in concrete long before they have left the philosophical arena. Do you know what I'm saying? You do. You absolutely know what I'm saying. So, God was never only interested in the Jews. Stupid. God was never only interested in the Jews. Don't be so stupid. And, again, if using Jews to represent every disgusting minority, right? Jewish, right? Then you begin to see their strong evidence. God only cares about the people who wish they were us. And then he does something miraculous. And he says, you wish us to be just like you. You want us to be just like you. No. But when I was in my house over there on the lake, to some degree, yes. Now I think, I don't know. I kind of have to get back, we're doing the philosophical classroom, and I kind of have to get back to this idea that communism and Nazism are vehement enemies, especially the way that we promote the idea of communism, right? The idea of what's going on in China. You don't want to be like China kind of stuff, because they are, and they may be using their science in these ways that just are inappropriate. I don't know who's doing it. Somebody around me is doing inappropriate science, that's for sure. I don't know. The God of evolution. So here's the next paradox. I don't know what their real motivation is what I'm saying. Maybe their motivation really is it's written in our DNA, and we want that written in yours now too. We want to see how to write that in yours as well. Ding, 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 ding. I think I just got that, huh? The God of evolution. Earth formed some 4,600 million years ago, and it has taken that long for evolution by natural selection to transform inanimate chemicals into human beings. Wow, that's amazing how you got that right. That those two things match. That Earth was formed some 4,600 million years ago, and it happens to be the same amount of time that natural selection was able to transform inanimate chemicals into human beings. Never knew chemicals to be inanimate. In fact, it has taken a total of 12 million years since the Big Bang to produce us. A long, long time from the vantage point. And again, this is the whole son of a bitch thing that they're doing right over here, right in front of your fucking face. And that is calling this science. It's not science, folks. It's philosophy. Call it what the hell it is, you ridiculous assholes. Trying to sell this off on science. If we stupefy the entire population, we'll be able to sell this as science. Who's ever heard of simply observing something? Come on. Science, experimentation, it's all about manipulation. Pay attention. I drugged you. You need to wake up. On you, we're studying the effects of alcohol. Now we've moved on. Oh, I'm sorry, we're not looking at you anymore. You're not obese. Second, we learn from evolution that God is willing to incorporate into the achievement of his purpose an element of chance. Oh, really, you motherfuckers? Is that what you call it? God put in an element of chance. You can bet on that. It was from God himself. Gee, idiot. The mutation on which natural selection works occur randomly. There is no conscious detailed design built into all the minutiae. There is a hands-off openness about the process. Yeah, except for your motherfucking dirty ass fingers are all over it. Right, Laughlin? Ha ha ha. There is a hands-off openness about the process. God appears to be allowing his world to be itself. And yet he knows that the whole system has been set up in such a way that his broad aims eventually will be achieved. Intelligent life of one form or another will, in due course, emerge. On other planets, the random events giving rise to life will be different, so humans as such will not evolve, but some form of intelligent life eventually will appear, a form of life that will at some stage begin to ask the ultimate questions concerning the purpose of life and whether there exists anything beyond the visible and tangible. Really, is that what they're going to ask? And then what are you going to say? Because we're asking the same questions, and when you were like, hey, look over here. Look over here in this microscope. Hey, wonder what kind of drugs is in this needle, don't you? Oh, it's in the wine? Oh, okay. On other planets, the random events giving rise to life will be different, so humans as such will not evolve. Yeah, that's another asshole statement by a scientist, isn't it? They can all evolve, motherfucker. Of course, you've got your fucking big toe on their temple. In these ways, our conception of God has to broaden. I don't think I read this. At that stage, relationship with God is established, which is why the world is here in the first place. In these ways, our conception of God has to broaden. Is that the handshake? I have no idea. It is here. The world is here to serve God. And that in doing so, the service to God is to do exactly what he asked us to do. To be able to run this place so that he can come back here. And all this nonsense about all these other aliens, yes, they might exist. But again, you're going to get a very small percentage of those people who are going to be what is left over and not dying. God gave everybody that choice. Hear his arrogant statement as if it's fact about I don't know. I'm just thinking about how much havoc is being raised about people who believe in the same God and believe in the same things, right? Human rights. So, you make a goblin and then everybody wants to get rid of the goblin. You've got a problem on your hands, especially if that goblin is actually the Holy Spirit. No matter what word you want to use, analogy would be a start, right? That's an analogy. It just is such arrogance. It's such arrogance. And by the way, don't think that I don't recognize some of these words for sure in my search for God. But my search for God and with God is, it's difficult because I was going to say it's not to be scrutinized, not in the way you want to scrutinize it in, punishable by death. Oh, that didn't work. She must be a demon. Oh, welcome to Jesus Christ. The life and times of Jesus Christ. I mean, always making the same mistake? Well, we did it for a man, got to do it for a woman. And are you calling yourself Jesus Christ? Didn't even call myself a God. I mean, right here, this is pretty explicit about what you would do with the prophet. God is willing to incorporate an element of chance. When you take a look at that, right now I'm looking at it through the perspective of all these criminals, right? Who have taken what doesn't belong to them. So second, we learn from evolution that God is willing to incorporate into the achievement of his purpose an element of chance. It's not chance. It's just not. The verbiage is wrong. Where in the Bible does that say that you have the right, or say anywhere that you have the right to interpret God's intentions as putting out there an element of chance? He gave you a prophet, and there's your element of chance, baby. It's just, so yeah, there could be all of these other galaxies and places, or it could be, as the Bible said, one place here that may be attracting because all other places are coming to the same realization that they can't do it without God. And by the way, looks like he might be over here at this healthy planet as long as we get these marshmallow men out of here. I say marshmallow brains, but So, where are we on time? One particularly difficult problem inherent in evolutionary theory has to be mentioned. Evolution by natural selection has been characterized by the phrase survival of the fittest. It is a crude description, but has some truth to it. It is all about survival, as is plain to see from the constant engagement between predator and prey. Although it is impossible to be sure what any other animal actually feels, it seems only reasonable to conclude that evolution involves suffering on a massive scale. Now, of course, there is nothing new about suffering. The problems of evil and suffering have been with us since time immemorial. Evil can be accounted for in terms of our own disobedience against the holy good God, and some suffering arises directly out of evil acts or from wanton unwillingness to help those in need. But not all suffering arises in this way. Even in the absence of human wickedness, there is suffering through natural causes such as earthquakes, flood, and failure of crops. But again, these seem like they are man-made consequences. I mean, we were reading this morning that hurricanes were unheard of, pretty much, here in the United States, but they were heard of in the West Indies. And again, lots of experimentation was going on with the atomic bomb. And why wouldn't that alter? And scientists don't give a shit. If there's a God, they're like, I'm going to die anyway, so if there's a God, let's see what he's going to do about that, altering the whatever. Time-space continuum. Just think about that. Why wouldn't scientists just alter the time-space continuum if they wanted to? A partial explanation might lie in the need for rigid laws of nature to hold sway so that we can exercise free will in an environment in which we know what the outcome of our actions will be. Inevitably, one will sometimes fall foul of those laws working out their inexorable course. One also has to accept that in a hypothetical world where there is no suffering, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to demonstrate one's love for another in the way one attends to his or her needs and is prepared to make sacrifices on that person's behalf. But having said that, the sheer degree of suffering in the world always has appeared to some to be excessive. Now, on top of that, we have to come to terms with the fact that the very process by which intelligent beings evolve incorporates by its very nature an unavoidable degree of intense suffering. Why did God choose evolution by natural selection? I mean, again, you make a fucking statement like it's the facts. Hey, get back to your philosophical areas. You always fit the numbers to every single promise or every single problem. Every problem that arose about the numbers, your theory changed to match the numbers. What kind of theory is that? That is just stunted growth thinking. Was there no other way? Clearly, we still have much to learn about the mind of God in this matter. God of time. In discussing the Big Bang, we saw that space and time are much more like each other than we might at first have suspected. Another conclusion. The view we get from Einstein is of a four-dimensional space-time rather than a three-dimensional space that evolves in time. It is a rather strange picture of reality. Nothing changes in four-dimensional space-time. Thanks, scientist. So glad you have all the answers. In order for there to be change, it must take place in time. But time is part of the four-dimensional reality we are talking about. There is no other. For this reason, many physicists talk of a block universe, one that contains all of space and time on an equal footing. So, for example, just as all of space exists at each point in time, so all of time exists at each point in space. Physical time is essentially static. This is not to say that space and time are indistinguishable. They clearly are very different, as we noted in the ways in which we measure the two. A ruler in one case, a clock in the other. Not only that, whereas one can travel no distance in a finite time, just stay still. One cannot travel a finite distance in no time. To do the latter, it would be feasible to travel an infinite speed. This possibility is ruled out by another consequence of relativity theory, namely nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, 300,000 kilometers per second. This constraint means that if one represents the motion of an object through space and time by tracing out its path in four-dimensional space-time, it can lie as close as it likes to the time axis. By remaining stationary, it would lie exactly along this axis. But there is a limit to how closely it can align itself with any of the spatial axes, the closest alignment being that of the light of a light beam. So a study of these paths in space-time would single out the time axis as different from the other three. In addition, we have the second law of thermodynamics. Disorder increases as time increases. If we have, for example, a photograph of an intact cup and another showing the same cup smashed, we immediately know that the latter relates to a set of circumstances found at a later time. In other words, nearer to the positive end of the time axis. The spatial axes do not exhibit any such asymmetry. So far, we have talked purely in physical terms, the motions of objects in light, measurements recorded by physical rulers and clocks, orderly and disorderly states. When we add to this our experience of space and time as conscious human beings, then further differences arise. In particular, as regards time, we become aware of a distinction among past, present, and future. We seem to inhabit the instant known as now, the past no longer existing, the future yet to exist. Moreover, we are aware of the flow of time. We move toward the future. We do not move toward the past, outside the realms of science fiction, that is. Whereas we noted that according to the second law of thermodynamics, there was more disorder toward one end of time axis than another, the conscious experience of time takes us in the direction that leads to more and more disorder. The inexorable movement is a feature only of time. There is nothing equivalent to compel us to travel in only one spatial direction. Now, it's not a feature of time, it's a feature of man. We are thus confronted with two entirely different understandings of time. On the one hand, we have conscious experience presenting us with a flowing time in which the constantly moving special instant called now separates the totally different domains of past and future. On the other hand, physics presents us with the static time in which no instant is singled out as in any way special, all instants of time being on an equal footing, just like all points in space. How are we to reconcile the two? How are we to see God in relation to time? There is no easy answer. The view of time that is mostly readily grasped is, of course, that of conscious experience. The static idea of time is so alien and counterintuitive that even some professional scientists are inclined to dismiss it as being somehow wrong. In contrast, there are others who would claim that the scientific picture has to be correct, and it is our conscious experience of time that is illusory. But it seems to me that rejecting or downplaying one of these approaches to the understanding of time in favor of the other is not the right course of action. Instead, we have to come to terms with the mystery that defies our normal categories of thought and our usual ways of organizing information. The dilemma over the two kinds of time points us toward a different type of understanding, one in which we have simultaneously to hold in mind seemingly contradictory paradoxical conceptions, each of which embodies some of the truth but not the whole. We saw something of this when we held in the mind simultaneously the ideas of God being both father and mother. To get the complete picture of reality, one needs both conceptions. One has to learn to accept that this conjunction of seemingly paradoxical ideas is the explanation. It might not be the type of explanation one had been expecting, but no matter. One must allow the nature of reality to dictate not just the answer to our question, but also the very form of the question we ask and the form of its answer. Excuse me. Constraining the outcome to fit in with our conventional notions as to what constitutes a satisfactory explanation can only distort the truth and leave us with an impoverished understanding. We have more to say on this in the next section when we tackle quantum theory. But for now, we note that our findings about time seem to point us in two directions at once. This, in turn, affects the way we ought to see God in relation to time. God is to be found in time. He participated in human life through Jesus Christ. He is the God to whom we pray. For prayer to be effective, it must bring about change. We must therefore live our lives on the assumption that God does not react to us. Not only do we change with time, but to some extent and in some sense, He too changes in answering our prayers. That is really, this really is, that sentence is easy stuff, right? But it is profound. God's promise is to come to us in time, and maybe not clearly in time when things are ready, right? But in our concept of time, and hopefully, as we all have we have our fingers crossed, in our time, right? Show us the way to the good life, the promises that we will know. Like, just for example, we would know our partner, just something, and I don't mean in a physical way. I mean in a deep emotional kind of connection way that hasn't been disturbed by drugs, pharmaceuticals, vaccines, all of those things which are supposed to be inoculations, right? That hasn't been disturbed by all of those things. So, yeah, how about that? How about? And they know what they've done. They disturbed that momentum, that connection to God and the connection to one another that make us realize, here's our family, right? Our real family that would be connected through bloodlines as well. Okay. So a nice thing, yeah. When we pray to God, we're not praying to, a God in a time we can't understand, because how would He answer our prayer? In time. That's what I like about this, though. Opening up those possibilities, as the author said, about who God is. We really have to stretch well beyond our conceptions of life and death, resurrection, reincarnation, because you have religions that are hopeless because of their constrained concepts of who God is. right? But for now, we note that our findings about time seem to. All right, we already said that. All right, I got it. But he is not just the God of mental life with its experience of flowing time and change. He is also the God of the physical world, the four-dimensional integration of all space and time. As such, all of time is present to him. He sees it all. He knows it all. This is the aspect of God's relationship to time that goes against the grain. It is difficult not to incorporate into our picture of God an extension of our own human limitations on knowing the future. But if we are to reach out to a more sophisticated understanding of God's nature, this is a temptation that has to be resisted. We must allow whatever are the currently accepted best interpretations of science to be the arbiter and guide. And the fact that those interpretations appear to include a time such that, in some sense or other, all of it exists on an equal footing surely makes it easier to accept that God has knowledge of the future. Not, of course, that there is anything new about the idea of God knowing the future. It is all there in the teaching of St. Paul, for instance. What modern science does is to lend an added measure of credibility to this ancient insight. And that's really what it's supposed to be doing. And if you're doing something else, you probably will find limitations to what you're doing. God's not interested. The acceptance of God's foreknowledge as something that arises from God's ability to encompass the whole of physical time from a vantage point lying beyond such time itself feeds back into our own personal relationship with God occurring within the type of time that is relevant to conscious experience. The God to whom we pray in that context is the God who knows what the outcome will be and who ensures that all will be well. That's my God right there. So another really easy statement to understand and believe and have said throughout our lives, and now maybe a little bit more of a feeling of truth, just like he said. What modern science does is lend an added measure of credibility to this ancient insight. And God didn't give you those talents and skills and curiosity to be studying a whole lot of other things, right? Your brother and your mother. In the same way, the God who built into evolutionary process a measure of random chance goes beyond a God who has simply stacked the odds so that it is overwhelmingly like intelligent life of some form will appear somewhere. He knows exactly what form that intelligent life will take. He's fine-tuning it right here. The idea of a God holding that somewhat paradoxical engagement with time that is both within the changing, open-ended time of conscious experience and also beyond the unchanging completeness of physical time is not easy to grasp. Indeed, let us be frank, it cannot be done. It cannot be grasped in the same sense as one might be able logically to prove a geometrical theorem. It is a truth and understanding of God that is to be accepted rather than mastered. It is a paradox that points to the truth rather than encompasses it. This paradoxical approach affords a way of further deepening our appreciation of the nature of God beyond that which can be achieved by straightforward use of any single metaphor drawn from everyday human life. The other thing about this is this. These scientists are writing this in a way that evolutionary scientists will listen, right? Or cosmologists or astronomers or anybody of that intellectual ilk. I know that because I could feel it, where I have a memory of where I would have written it and where I have always have had arguments with evolutionary theory because of its changeability for the argument, not for the purposes of knowledge and understanding, right? And so that's a really big deal. That's a really big deal. Are these scientists really in it for research, notoriety, and money, or are they in it for answers? And then why not call it a philosophy? Stop with your jackassedness and call it a philosophy, exactly what it is. Thanks so much for joining me here. We've been here now. Excellent timing. April 8th, for infinity and beyond. We've said it every time. It is day 334. This is the reading room. I'm Dr. Annette Feravich, where, and I just want to say this as well. People are excited about what intrigues them and a depth of information that will intrigue them continuously, right? It can be different subjects, but people are excited about what intrigues them, and then they continue to seek that out. So, I mean, we and then science puts a whole bunch of labels on it and names, and then they get popular because they can write books with these labels and names. No, I am common sense psychology, which is what people wanted from psychology from the very beginning. I don't want some jackass talking to me like he knows something I don't know, right? So you glean really good advice on health, physical health, spiritual health, and emotional health, really good advice on how to live your life. And that's your psychology, right? And that's really what my intention has always been since I started in psychology, to bring common sense language, not just common language, but common sense language to really your mental health, right? Really your mental health. That's where I'm working the most, because I know that is key to your spiritual health and your physical health. You're not going to take care of yourself if your mental health is in the toilet. All right. Yeah, and that's what happened last night. I just, crapped out all of my mental health last night. Cleared it out. I'm no longer a shithead. Dr. Annette Feravich, thanks so much for joining me here in the classroom, where we are figuring out ways to clean out that mind. That goes back to the thalamus and what we were talking about in the Bookless classroom. And that, after a while, you've got everything in place that you need. And so you begin to bypass. And maybe that's what the empty-headedness is. And so you're looking for a little air in there. I need the air that I breathe, rather than being a shithead, which is what the brains look like if they were filled with poop. More like the intestines. So now that you've got that whole theory, think on it. Thanks so much for joining me here in the classroom.